This happens on the background of an enormous explosion of mystical and gnostic and otherworldly models in my homeland, around in Prague, and to a lesser extent in all Western European cultures, because it seems that they are approaching end of their cycle, that degenerate very quickly. And in a situation like that, sects and fantastic Gnostic explanations and cults are popping up, with Nietzsche as a necessity. This is it. We cannot criticize. It's like, we know the truth and it should be all done by biocentric Zen, No, it is impossible. It is not possible. As Nietzsche says very wisely, many want something, but only a few can. There's a great difference between wanting and being able to do it. We don't know ourselves yet, which is also a good Nietzsche's and Goethe's wisdom, that what the weaver weaves, he does not know. Only looking backward, like in epochs of 10 to 20 years, we can cognitively understand what we have been through. In the moment it is happening, it is necessarily happening, so and the meaning of it escapes us. So, but what we know now, because we have been through those various stages ourselves, becoming Christian mystics, becoming Gnostics, of the traditional demiurge time, becoming now the followers of, for a week or two, I was a follower. It is fascinating. The cycles are getting faster and faster. For 2 weeks, I was a follower of John Lamplish, Mother Sophia Gaia, until it was so superstructure strong on our soul that we have lost the childish admiration for nature, because we were all the time, peeking and waiting for the traces of Sophia, the body of the aeon, in the waves and in the birds and in the trees and the sun. And it was danger that we become conceptually trapped in that model. And as I've said, in my life, I have been, you would not believe that, I was an personal assistant of the Messiah, who has returned around, 1994, 95. There was one of those enlightened madmen of the Eastern Europe, who proclaimed he is the second coming of Christ, and this time he is the incarnated willpower. It was a very special type, and he was very intelligent, and he was also an artist. He studied cinema production, and he was, all sides of his personality were very strongly developed, and artistically, powerful, creative. And somehow in his life, what happened as a crisis, he got a book into his hands by this, in the truth, in the light of the truth. It is a sect, and a following in all around the world, and mainly in Austria was the base. A man who has written a 1500-page book out of the scratch without looking into other books or whatever, without quotations, references, and so. He has written it on the top of the mountains in Austria, in some cottage, like very much like Zen style living, but he was hearing a voice that dictated him the book, and it came out as a kind of singular 1500 pages of everything. Explanation of history, present, man, soul, body, spirit, heaven, hell, and all in a kind of Christian, mystique, Wagnerian, warrior type text. And in a certain period of my life where I needed, in 1995 or so, I needed this type of experience. I needed to renew the contract with my homeland, Czech, Bohemia, Prague. And I needed, the warrior type excellence in leading the mankind to salvation. Whoa! And I became an assistant of this guy. And we actually were, I was an expert on Exodus. You would not believe that. These are some, all my life, even though I was experiencing crazy situations and terrible and tragic situations and beautiful and wonderful, I have always retained a kind of artistic flavor into everything, looking at it as a great drama, theater kind of style that I can take part in. And if the background is beautiful, if there are mountains and lakes and rivers and seas, if the costumes are fitting, I simply take part in it because it is an unusual, performance done as a split personality of a Gemini can do. As I have said, you can enjoy it fully, taking part in it, and at the same time we have a certain distance, which after all is, in biocentric phenomenology, the quality of cosmogonic Eros. Eros is always in phenomenon of distance, an experience of a certain distance, because in distance the qualities of the morphogenetic field, that I say, not of the body but of the soul, are dominant. There is a unity of body and soul. Even though if you love a beautiful girl, you can either stress, as I have always did, the visual image at the distance, at a certain distance, and her composition, her being a part of a beautiful natural composition in the mountains. I sometimes was really obsessed by this, by sending my girls, to walk in front of me, like 100 meters in the mountains or at the shore of the lake or at the sea, so that I can enjoy the image, this beautiful picture of distance, where her long hair and slim shoulders and the haze coming from the sea or the trees bending over her head on some mountain road would combine into a perfect kind of Zen painting, or a romantic painting. In the romantic painting, the shape, the bodily shape is more present, because it is equivalent to the stronger presence of the ego in a romantic soul. In a Zen painting, the ego is almost completely dissolved, and so there are only just the brush touches the surface, and mountains and lakes, and if there are some human shapes, it's only hinted at. And so on, forget it. I was loving this situation. If I can be in the arms of the Cosmogonic Eros to see and feel at a distance that which I love, which I would like to embrace, and I was postponing the moment of physical embracement as much as possible to enjoy this dreamy state of, it's like in the cinema, you fall in love with a beautiful actress, and as long as the cinema is only for you because you ignored all other souls that are watching the film with you, and the lights go on and there is a terrible shock, and you cannot walk and see her in front of you. So I made a private cinema of my life that I see, and I organize somehow. I use the abilities of my ego to organize a situation like this, and then release it from the ego and enjoy purely the passive soul. So feast, this celebration of the distance of Eros. And so this was an excuse for me to take part in the most wild and crazy projects, as I have been this, as I told you, assistant of the returning Messiah. There was a special touch in this Messiah because he had this, according to the origin, and the name of a man who wrote the book is Oscar Bernhardt, In the Light of the Truth. There are many followers still. The idea is basically this, that when Jesus, because they all stay in the Christian paradigm, when Jesus was crucified, the Godhead decided to make it better this time, and he separated from his self another aspect of him, which was the will, the strong godly will, and started to incarnate it through the many levels of heavens. In this sense, it is agnostic theory because there are many levels, but these levels were very Hollywood-like style. That's why I admire it. There were castles, and there were warriors, and there were beautiful women, in this kind of overstructure of the Christian romantic heavens. And this will of the Godhead incarnated slowly through over 2,000 earthly years to our present, which was around 1980 or something like that. And then it embodied in a certain human being, and the human being got in touch with the sources, with the literature, and then had this realization that he is it. And this willpower is different from love, because the first embodiment of the Godhead was the loving part of his self in Jesus Christ. But we have not accepted him, we have killed him. As human race has not welcome him. So now the will to power, basically, the God's will be incarnated, and it will push the program through at all costs. And one of the supporting elementary phenomena will be the destruction of the known civilization and of the known elementary composition of the earth. So a kind of last judgment, where the selected one will survive. And I was reading this, and I was fascinated by the romantic warriors and the castles, and I contacted this guru, and he said, well, this all has been, preconditioned by the past history. We have been together in Sodom and Gomorrah, somewhere, one of those cities that has followed the advice of God. We have survived, and now it will be repeated. We are reincarnated, and all this Gnostic stuff was put on that, and already I was on the road with him to the last resort on planet Earth where we shall survive the last judgment. And it was in Italy, on the south slope of the Dolomite, which was fantastically and totally in agreement with me, because I was a skiing instructor and was running down the snowy hills of the Alps everywhere where there's a beautiful landscape. So I embarked on the exodus from the Lake Bodensee, and I traveled through the Alps, and I took my skis with me. It was a kind of heroic, romantic, last apocalyptic snow tours, because I went up the hills and down the hills and was greeting the slope, saying, I am the last man to slide down in this powdery snow. I mean, you must be a good skier, you must be a good poet, and you must be slightly a madman to enjoy this. No? But all the time, I was having this aesthetic distance to all what is happening and saying, well, whatever it is a great performance, it is a great drama, and I enjoy it. Similarly, I was fascinated by Castaneda, Carlos Castaneda, when I was like 17. Yeah? I read all his books, going to the mountains for skiing weekends, and and reading his books, after skiing. It was wonderful. And later, as it was revealed that it was a kind of, private madness of Castaneda, and some of the people who were in his group have given a witness what was happening. There was one guy who became a Hollywood filmmaker or whatever, or script writer. He said, you see, I don't regret that. It was a great period of my life, and my creativity was, enjoying it to the full, because it was a living cinema. It was a kind of ongoing performance. No? And he probably had the same structure of the soul, that he could enjoy it fully and yet keep the distance of a writer, poet, creator, and also to keep a sharp eye intuitively on the mismatches, on that which didn't agree, as I did also. So soon I discovered, as we were on the Exodus, that it does not agree what they do in real terms with what they were saying. Like, we were 3 cars, because he wrote me a letter that the situation, the morphogenetic field and the radiation of the soul and evil evil powers have, encroached him, and he must leave the origin of his, group in Bohemia and travel, because apocalypse is near, travel with the selected few to that place where we shall start a new chapter in human history. So, okay, I'm going. I got into a car, which was by luck of fate given to me at the same time by a friend, and I traveled, as I have told you, with the skis and with a guitar to the guru to be an expert on Exodus, because I knew the landscapes. We were supposed to go over Bavaria, Austria, to Italy. So I made those skiing trips in Switzerland, Bavaria, Austria, and then I arrived. And this was, somebody should make a comedy film about that, man. I arrived in a high school building where there was the final meeting before the Exodus. And there were the selected few were collected there, and the master, the incarnated God's will, and his personal assistant, who was a visionary, because he said, I am the Godhead, the will, I will pull this through, and this is Mr. Seer, he is my visionary, he sees everything what will happen. And there, I was there also, the third guy in this group, who was an expert on Exodus because he knew the geography. I was a relatively, late newcomer, and my knowledge was, transitory, because, the world I knew will be, folded, it will stop to exist, but as long as this world is there, we need an expert on geography who will guide us into the promised land. And he also knows languages, and this is necessary. I was supposed to then, when the world will be crushed, we will then travel to the ruins of Vatican, and my Godhead, will of God, will have a speech to the nations, and I will translate it. Okay. Oh, well, what would you ask for? This is the best you can have. And so I arrived there, and that was fascinating, because part of my fascination for him was his style, in which he refused most of the adepts. And also he wrote a book which was called the most important book of this millennium, The Son of Man, in which he collected his visions, experiences, and wisdom on the background of a culture which I knew very well, which was the elitist circles of Prague, 70s, 80s, philosophy, art, literature, politics, and he classified them very much. He knew them. He really knew them, and that was fascinating for me. And also in his practical life, he refused most of the adepts who wanted to follow him. He said simply to them, you are not deep enough. Okay, so this is a slightly different approach as the gurus who accept everybody as long as they pay, because they wanted to pay him, they wanted to give him everything. He said, no, you are not pure. And he had this guy, this visionary man, to decide the pureness of the adepts, because this is also fascinating. This guy who was the seer was actually an engineer of chemistry, of construction, or whatever. He was a scientific man, But he had a vision, and he saw a huge cross over the head of this guru. He called himself Parsifal so that we can call him somehow. And this visionary man was able to see the aura and mainly the colors of violet and yellow. And he judged the people according to how much of yellow they still have, because yellow was wrong. It was still the color of personality, ego, pride, and sin, and so. Whereas violet was the color of enlightenment and loving, pure soul. And then these young couples this happened, this selection of the those who can follow Godhead, the Seer, and me as a guide, expert on Exodus, who can follow them to the promised land, happened in a building of a high school, in a typical classroom, where I, as the first, have rolled out a map of Central Europe down to Italy, and have taken, a stake like they use in teaching of geography, and I enjoyed it. I must say, I'm crazy. I was crazy at the time. I enjoyed it as a perfect performance of some super Hollywood film, and I was showing the way where she will go and where we will go and where we cross the borders, and I have organized already some hotels and nice places to stay because I've traveled there before, and said, we are a group of artists searching for inspiration, going to the south, and I would like to organize accommodation and so and so. And always I said, the question of money is not important because there is unlimited money. So, and it was really true, because many people have given him all his possessions, and he was rich, okay, and he was at the same time very honest in the sense of not using it too much for himself, but saying, if they want to give it to me, okay, I don't change my decision. If they don't fit, they don't fit. So, and then these young couples, these were the adepts were always young couples, because the new mankind was supposed to be, originated young couples like 25, 26, also 20 sometimes. And they were approaching the steps, at schools, in the high school in Europe, in Middle Europe, there is always the teacher's desk, and there is a sign of pedestal on which it stands, and then there is the classroom, and people sit in couples always. 3 rows of benches, 2 in a row, 2 students in one bench. So there were these couples that they were approaching, and the God had always said to the seer, now look at them, how much yellow do they have? And the seer said, like almost always, 95% violet, 98% violet, and the God had always made a kind of dissatisfied face and said, this is terrible, you are not 100%. You have to wait until you have 100%, then you can come. And so in this way, all were refused. Imagine that. You are prepared for all your life. You have prepared, at least for the last year, you have prepared. You have fasted, you have obeyed all the rules, and you have said the prayers, and so on. Now you want to go to the promised land, and the Godhead says, no, you are not 100%. Well, they were really destroyed. And some of them got angry. They looked at me and said, now look at this expert in Exodus, Mr. Pavel. How many percent does he have? And the seer looked at me. Godhead gave him command, and he looked at me and said, "There, Mister, that's only 40% violet." And they were cheering, like, you see, he can go, and he has a... But the Godhead stopped them and said, "Listen, this is not a typical case. Mr. Pavlos is an expert on Exodus. He knows the geography of the old world, which will not persist. So we use his ability as a guide," okay? And I looked at them in my kind of theatrical style. I said, "You see, I always recommend you to acquire an expertise in something. You will be, needed by the powers to be if you are an expert, Don't just believe, become an expert at something." Okay, and then we went on, leaving the group of the initiated behind us, and we traveled. And then the mistakes happened, like, we went into Bavaria, and the command of the Godhead was, we have to go small roads, which I was accepting, which small roads are the more beautiful, yes. And we have to go maximum 50 kilometers per hour, because otherwise our soul will be torn away from the godly spark. And he said, "Okay, this is okay with me. I like slowing. I go going slow in the beautiful nature." And so there were these 3 cars. Godhead with his girlfriend. They were not married, but they had this. Strangely enough, they had the same surname. So they was not objection. They had like 5 children. And the seer and his wife, they had 3 children. And then I, in my sports car with an open roof, with skis in it and guitar, and also the cello, because the Godhead was playing a cello quite well, and he didn't have place in his car for the cello, so he gave it to me. So there was an open roof, and the cello neck was sticking out, and the skis were sticking out, and like that we were going for the Exodus now. First was going the visionary, because he saw everything what will happen now. Second was the Godhead, but he didn't have a driving license. But he looked, and I asked him why does not he have a driving license? He looked at me with scorn, like saying, "These pure humans, know what the Godhead can do." And then there was me, and he also gave me the bank. I was the banker also of the Exodus. He gave me a big plastic bag, and I looked into it, and it was like, if you, like in the banks, if you have the $100 banknotes, if you press them tightly and you make a big box of it. So it was it, and it was German money. It was still German marks at that time. And said, "You take this over the border." I said, "Well, okay." And I put it into my skiing bag, where I had some skiing equipment and shoes and stuff like that, and back in the car. And we go over the border. As truly enough, they were not controlled, but I was stopped because, his crazy German license plate with a cello and skis on it, coming from Eastern Europe to the West. Oh, I mean, so the customs officials, they were simply interested. They maybe have been born there. Nobody else was crossing a small road. Just like, this crazy guy, let's check him. So they check it and open the door and open everything. And this guy sticks his hand into that box. He opened my ski box, no? And he's just, moving around. And then he says, okay, everything fine, go on. He actually touched the box with the money, which might have been like hundreds of thousands of German Deutschmarks now. But he was thinking it is something with ski boots, no? And so he let it go. So we went on. So first I was, persuaded. It was like, I was disbelieving. And then I had a true proof that we are under the protection of the Godhead. And we had to stop sometimes to pee. And again, I was enjoying the situation. Like, I cannot pee on the same side of the road as the Godhead. It's impolite. I must go to the other side. And then I had my first suspicion when the visionary who was guiding us suddenly lost his way, and we were going on and on and on and on. And suddenly we were on a sandbank and then a gravel and so and so. And we were in the river Danube in the middle. There was some construction going on and probably building a bridge or whatever. So a gravel sandbank was built into the flow of the river. And we stopped there. And I said, "Mom, this is enough. I am not only the expert on languages and the hotels, I am the expert on geography of the old world. So I take the command, and let's go back, and I will take you there where it's supposed to go." So I was guiding this, and other stories. And I don't have to tell you this everything. Then I separated then from them. Again, I was enjoying it to the full, but I had also my own life. And in my own life, I said, okay, I devote a weekend for this. The beginning of the Exodus, I was a weekend Exodus specialist. But on Monday, I had to go to work here in the city of Constance. I was working as a physiotherapist in a private place, and I enjoyed that place very much. I was living on a biological farm with horses and goats, and every morning I would get on a bicycle and bicycle through beautiful woods to the shore of the lake. There I had a canoe. I would get into a canoe and paddle onto an island which is called Reichenau. You can check it up in the atlas, geographical atlas. This is the island in the middle of the half island in the middle of the western part of the Lake Bodensee, between Germany and Switzerland, but it's German. And I would paddle across, 15 minutes paddling across a bay of the lake, then put the canoe on the chain and run across the half island peninsula and work in a place that was facing Swiss shore on the other side in a private physiotherapy studio. And I was very successful as a healer in physiotherapy always, because I am a sportsman and I know the body. And the owner of the studio was, I was honest in that time. I said, well, I have to finish working here because there's going to be the end of the world and I'm going to the safe place. But I still come back on Monday for the patients because, they are already booked. Nah? I'll do the job and then you are on your own and I wish you the best luck. Nah? And as we were together in Bavaria in a hotel that I have organized for the group of artists, so to say, we were eating the dinner and I said, well, you see, I drive during the night back to in my hometown, and I have to work on Monday, and then I will come back. And he disagreed. The Godhead disagreed, saying, "You don't have to care about these people. They are all going to die. And you don't have to care about money. We have unlimited resources." Oh, I said, this is all good, but somehow I feel I have this obligation, because you see, when the patients are waiting, this all is booked. I don't want to cause trouble for the owner of the studio, so I will go anyhow. And I went through the night. In the morning, I visited my former girlfriend, with whom I played tennis regularly. And my working hours were from 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So at 10, we had our traditional Monday play of tennis on the courts on which I play until the day. And I said at that time, again, it was a kind of extremely romantic and dramatic and beautiful day. And she was, my former girlfriend, but she was still, very beautiful. And I told her, listen, this is our last game. And this is the last game at all. Because this is the end of the world. I mean, you must have looked on a series of romantic, dramatic films, to enjoy the situation. And then I do the job. I win the game. I go and I treat the last patients and look at them with an eye of a, wise prophet, like saying, and a Zen master at the same time. Whatever happens, if there is the end of the world, nevertheless, we do our duties as usual. Because what else is there to do? Then I get into the car and drive back to the hotel. And in the morning, there was a clash with the Godhead. I gave him the cello, and he said, "I don't think you should continue with us, because you should return when you were 100%. And I said, well, okay. I also have a certain quality of the Gemini. So if there is a kind of great clash, or there is a breakdown of a situation that was developing in one way for a long time, and suddenly it goes the other way completely, I have this kind of shield of an aesthetic distance, the Cosmogonic Eros. I enjoy the weather and the colors and the shapes of the situation in which it happens more than the cognitive meaning of what is happening. Yes, okay, I agree. I make a trip and I make another ski tour, or, wandering in a beautiful landscape, which I knew very well, and I was enjoying it like, wow, look at this beautiful world. Maybe it is my mission to enjoy the beauty and not to go to Vatican and to proclaim the end of civilization. Well, so, you have it. You have it. I did this detour because it's a nice story, nevertheless.